Pilgrim stories. I've been a pilgrim, you guys have known now for 15 years. And I've collected so very many stories over the many, many miles and many, many years. And some of these stories are really kind of valuable to retell and to think about. They're transferable and one can share them. But before I get into my pilgrim stories, I just want to sort of set the foundation. So many of you may have heard of folk tale. So I just want to dive into a folk tale. That's not my story, but mine might hang on to. And the folk tale is something called nail soup or stone soup equally. So let me just recap this folk tale very quickly. In the story of nail soup, once upon a time in a land far, far away, a stranger walked into a village. And it's an agricultural village, and there are some little farmsteads, and there's maybe a blacksmith, and there's maybe a windmill, and maybe a bakery, and there's maybe a, whatever, the things you need in a village to make the village work. And the stranger walked in and encountered one of the residents, just a man of the village, and the stranger with his shoulder bag starts talking to the guy. The guy says, "Hey, you're a stranger here, I don't recognize you." And the stranger says, "Oh yeah, I've come from quite a long ways, and I've been walking these many, many days. In fact, you know, about 3 days walk from here is the big town, the big city. And did you know they're going to build a bridge now across the river, and that's really fantastic for all of us." And the resident had no idea. Well, that's amazing. So they're talking, and the stranger is telling the villager all of the news that's happened, that what battles that have happened far, far away, kings that have married, and all these sorts of things. They're also very delighted. This guy's very delighted with the stories of the stranger. And after a while, the stranger says, "Well, I'm getting a little peckish. I want to make a meal, and there's a stream here. I'm going to get some water, and I have a nail here in my bag, and I'm going to make some soup. So I'm going to have a nail soup, but you can join me if you want." And the resident says, "I've never heard of nail soup. This sounds fascinating. Is there enough for you? You only have a little pot." And the stranger says, "Oh, if you have a bigger pot, you're welcome to share in my soup. I have a little pot, but you can share in my soup. And, sometimes I do add, a potato or an onion or a carrot or something to my soup. And this, it all makes it home and get my potato in a bigger bowl, and maybe we can do this together." "Yeah, sure, we can share." And I said, "Well, I'm going to run home. I was going to have a potato for mine." The stranger encourages him. And the fellow runs off, and he's going toward his house, and he sees his neighbor across the way who is in her garden, and she's digging up a carrot. She said, "Hey, neighbor, what are you in a hurry for?" "Well, there's a stranger down by the well, and making a nail soup. It has all the news of the big village, of the big town far away from here, but he's making a nail soup out of a nail. But I can add my potato." And she said, "Well, I've got a carrot. Can I add my carrot?" "Yeah, sure. Come on down. Bring your bowl. Bring your soup, or bring your spoon." So they do, and then the villager finds another guy, and the guy was going to have an onion for his meal, and he says, no, come and put your onion in the nail soup. It's going to be fantastic." And the stranger knows everything about what's going on, all the news of the region, everything. So all these people start coming down and visiting with the stranger, and the stranger's making the soup with his nail, and now the onion and the potato and the carrot, and others are contributing. And then there's the miller who's milled the wheat, and they said, "Come with us." And the miller says, "No, I don't need some stranger's nail soup. I'm just going home." Well, the miller's wife is the baker, and she says, "Well, I'm going. This is going to be interesting." So takes the look for bread and goes down to the riverside or the stream side and joins in the fun. And they're all talking, and they're all making this big soup. And the stranger says, telling all of the news of the area, the stranger says, "Is there anybody else? Who else can join in our soup, in our meal?" And someone says, "Ooh, there's the carpenter. But the carpenter had an accident lately. His little boy kicked over a candle and the whole place burned up. But, he's there. Maybe he joins." So someone goes and gets the guy, and this carpenter says, "Oh, but I have nothing to contribute to the soup." And fella said, it doesn't matter. Come down and join the stranger. It won't matter. It doesn't matter. So everybody is gathered around. And the carpenter who had nothing, and the man who had the onion and the potato, and the woman who had the carrot, and the baker who had the bread, everyone gathers around. And we're listening to the stranger, and the stranger's telling them all the news of the area. And they're enjoying this meal. And then, is there anybody absent? And the carpenter says, well, my wife, after the accident and burned down my shop, she's up now at the far field gleaning the rest of the wheat so we can have some porridge. And the baker says, oh, I had no idea it was so bad. Before the sun sets, my little boy will be up there with a sack of wheat. You guys won't starve. I had no idea. But you'll be fine as long as I'm in this town. And they're still listening to the stories of the stranger, and the stranger says, yes, with this new bridge, maybe the carpenter could have some work. Just go and visit this 3 days away where this new bridge is being built. And everyone's enjoying it. And they finish the soup and all the stories going back and forth. And there's a bit of soup left, anybody missing? Okay, take the rest of the soup for your wife, and I'll take the mail. Okay, we're done with our meal. And the stranger says, it's time for me to leave. I've got to go. And the first guy says, no, you can't go. We just really enjoy having you here. You're telling us everything we need to know. And this is so fabulous, and it's broken our monotony. Please stay. I have a barn with a loft, and it's very warm there. Stay in my loft. You could stay as long as you want. But the stranger says, wiping off the mail and putting it in his bag, no, I've got to go. I'll visit many other villages and many other people and spreading the news of what's going on in the town. And yeah, it's time for me to go. And everyone was sad to see the stranger leave. He made the nail soup, which was preposterous but delicious. And everyone who had a little now had more. And even those who had none had something. But the stranger said, I gotta go. And so the stranger leaves. Now, in an Aesop fable or something like this, you would have a moral to the story. But this story has no concise moral. Each one of you has to decide for yourself. Who is the stranger? Who is the stranger? Someone could say cynically, come on, don't fool me. That's some vagabond with a tall tail and a rusty nail who got himself a soup. And someone else could say, wait a minute, I think the stranger is a saint. Someone could say, the angel of the Lord. Someone could say, Jesus Christ himself, who has come to visit us and show us that we are stronger as a community than we are as a collection of individuals. That's the importance of the stranger. Yeah. Okay. Now, that's the folktale. Now let me tell you some of my own stories. So you've heard, I am a pilgrim of extraordinary adventures. And I've been a pilgrim for 15 years, and I've traveled around the world to 56 different countries, all over the US. And I've gone more than 45,000 kilometers on foot. I'm generally a pilgrim solo, all on my own, going to far and distant lands in places unvisited. And other times I guide small groups of pilgrims, and we go smaller distances, but still to enable these younger, other pilgrims to have a pilgrim experience that they would not otherwise be able to have on their own. So that's what I do, and I'm consecrated to do this. I've been doing this a long time, and for me, the last pilgrimage ends in heaven. I'll just keep walking. I'm thinking next year, I'll pass the second lap around the Earth. The Earth is 24,000 miles in circumference, so I think next year I'll be up to 48,000 miles the second lap. So I have some thousands of experiences, hundreds of experiences, thousands of experiences that are, you kind of got to be there, but they're really meaningful. This is not the Camino de Santiago. I love the Camino de Santiago. It's so very important for so very many pilgrims. But I don't go typically on the Camino de Santiago. I find my own pathways through the world. I walk village to village in places otherwise unvisited. And I do this in order to encounter the people who are there, to meet with them, to talk with them, to share some small segment of life with them. I go into their community, whether their community is a family community, or a singular community, or a municipal community, or a religious community, or a military community, it doesn't matter. Every day in the morning, I have no idea where I'm going to sleep at night. But in these 15 years and 45,000 miles, I have never not found a place to sleep at night. I have never not found a community who has welcomed me into it and given me shelter for the night and allowed me to continue on my journey. So I want to start not so long ago, 2014, not so far away, southern Colorado into northern New Mexico. And I was guiding a small group of pilgrims from a rather elite high school in Denver, a Catholic high school, Matchproof High School, and there were some senior boys, all 18 years old, and ready to go off to college. They'd all been accepted into university for the following semester, and this was their spring break for their senior year. And there was a fellow who was something of a spiritual director, and he organized these young men. There were supposed to be 6 young men. When we started, there were only 5 young men, but it didn't matter. And this was, beautifully, a pilgrimage from Purgatory. In southern Colorado, there's Purgatory Mountain and Purgatory Stream coming down. And that's where we began, and we were going to the shrine Santiago de Chimayo in northern New Mexico. It's a very famous pilgrim destination. So these fellows were gathered. They had a spiritual director, and I was there to guide the pilgrimage, make sure we had the pathway, and know where we were going to sleep at night, and make sure we would have some food at night and food again in the morning, and everything would be fine. This is how I was able to help this group. So we started out, we continued, we stayed one night on with Navajo families on the Southern Ute Indian Reservation in southern Colorado. Then the next night we stayed in a ghost town, and the ghosts came down and hosted us with a potluck lunch or dinner, but we slept in the church that was really old and wonderful. It was just fabulous. Then we continued on our way, and there was kind of a pasture, a big penned-in area that had some buffalo. And it was springtime, so there were baby buffalo. And so we all kind of were lined up to look at the baby buffalo. Oh, look at the baby buffalo, it's so nice. And there was another fellow there who was there. He had a pickup truck, and he was there, and he was a really rough-looking guy. And by rough-looking, I mean he had a shaved head with tattoos carved into his skull. And he had on his knuckles fear and hate carved into his knuckles. He was a really sinewy, rough-looking guy, tall and thin, early 30s. And so we're looking at him. I had all these really clean-cut boys from this really posh high school, very high academic levels. I mean, this very different kinds of people. And the fella started talking to me, and the spiritual director came and drifted over. You know, who is this guy? Is everything okay? And the guy's talking to me, and he's really rough. His language, his tone is really rough. And so I'm telling him about our pilgrimage to the Santiago to Chimayo. And he said, you know, I've heard of Chimayo. And it was about 100 miles from where we were. And he said, yeah, my mom always talked about Chimayo and going on a pilgrimage to Chimayo. And I really never really understood what it's all about, but I know it's a thing. So we're talking to him a little bit, and he's rough, and you know, but okay, he's hanging around. And then he comes up to me and he says, hey, is this a pilgrimage that anybody can go on? Can I go on this pilgrimage, or is this a private thing? And I said, well, look, anyone who really desires in their heart to go on a pilgrimage can go on a pilgrimage. And you can join us if you'd like. We'll make sure you have a place to sleep and something to eat. We're going mostly to Catholic parishes, and they'll take care of us along the way. But look, these are really good boys. These young men, big futures, they're good young guys. So come on, no rough language, nothing really crude. These are good young guys. And the nice Catholic boys here, I'll try to arrange every day that we'll go to a Catholic Mass if we can, if I can find a priest. And we sleep in parishes, and the parishioners, these are the ones who are helping us. So you gotta be courteous and polite, you gotta be respectful. And this fellow said, I can be respectful, I can be courteous, I can do this. And I said, well then, yes, of course, you can join us. You need a backpack, and you need to have good shoes. You can walk all day, because we're walking this 100 miles longer. But of course you can join us. You don't have to go to Mass, but you've got to be respectful. Yes, 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 I can do this. I said, okay, go get your stuff. So he drives off, and the spiritual director's like, really? You think this is okay? And I said, well, we cannot deny a pilgrim the opportunity to go on pilgrimage. And we've got to trust him that he's going to, work with us and not fight against us. And either that or we'll all be dead by morning. So, okay. So after a little while, we're continuing our way, and the fella comes up, and someone drove a pickup truck, and he was in the back, and he hopped off, and he's got a ride, and he said, I'm here to join you. I said, okay, I'll introduce you around. Here are all the boys. And this fella's name was Jesse. Jesse was 33 years old, it turns out. And little by little, we're all learning about Jesse. Jesse had just been released from federal prison for drug use, opioids. And it was his third time in prison, and he should have been in for a longer sentence, but he had a generous parole board, and they kind of let him out on his rehabilitation promise, and it was going to be okay. He was hopeful. And Jesse is there talking with these young men. I can assure you, these young men from affluent families in Denver at this posh high school had never met a man like Jesse. Similarly, Jesse had never met these young men. Anyone like him. He had no clue. At the end of the day, we get to a Catholic school serving the mission of the Jicarilla Apaches. And they let us sleep at the school, and we had a meal, and we had Mass. And all of the young men wanted to go to confession. So Mass was delayed a little bit, and the priest was very happy. And I'm sitting in the church with Jesse, and he's pointing to things. What does that mean? And what is that? And why is that there? And what's going to happen here? I need to understand all this. And I explained everything. And he said, I really remember when I was a little boy being in a place like this, and I remember I was wearing a suit and tie. I was like, Jesse, you went through First Communion. Oh, yeah, maybe. And Jesse then experienced the Mass and enjoyed the meal that the Guadalupanas, the church ladies, had provided for us. And then we all slept in the classrooms. And in the morning, they asked us to spread out, and 1 or 2 pilgrims to talk to each one of the small children in this K through 8 school. And so I don't know exactly where Jesse went. I was with the kindergartners, he was with some other grade. And it worked. Jesse kind of fit in somehow as a 33-year-old man with our 18-year-old boys. And they each taught each other things they had no idea about. And it was peaceful and gentle and good and helpful. And we continued on our way, day by day, getting closer to Chimayo. And Jesse, one of those days, asked me, hey, we're going to have another Mass, right? Yeah. Do you think I could talk with the priest? I'm like, I will arrange that. So Jesse spoke with the priest, and Mass was delayed, but we were there. And all these wonderful things, and the Knights of Columbus feeding us dinner, and the Guadalupanas feeding us breakfast, and always giving us something to eat, and continue along our way. So about a week later, we get close to Chimayo. We were going to be at the Church of Chimayo for a Sunday Mass. And I was like, guys, we got to hurry, because Mass starts at 10:30, and I know this priest, he won't be happy if we're late, so hurry along. So I run ahead and I get to the priest and I explain, here we are with this good group of good young Catholic men from the Catholic high school in Denver, but also we picked up this guy, Jesse, along the way. What was his name? Jesse. And he said, well, we've got to wait for Jesse because the gospel today is all about Jesse and the identification of David, who would become the future king after he fought Goliath. So he said, Jesse is very important. So we're waiting, and the Mass is delayed, and we pilgrims were going to be part of the procession going into Mass and sit on either side in the front row of the Santiago to Chimayo in New Mexico. Waiting. Mass was delayed about 10 minutes. Jesse finally showed up with one of the other guys he had been talking with. We get there. Jesse's looking around this beautiful little church, this little shrine, and he is weeping. And he had completed this pilgrimage. And these young men are so proud of themselves. They walked well over 100 miles through the desert there, and they were proud of themselves. And Jesse was just moved. The priest was moved, and then everybody was moved. It was a beautiful thing. So, okay, our pilgrimage is over. The boys went back to their posh high school up in Denver. Jesse asked for help getting back to where he had lived, and I continued on my way. And several months later, about 3 months later, I was back up in Denver getting ready to go off on pilgrimage again, a solo pilgrimage, and I got a call. And a woman says, hey, this is Southern New Colorado phone number. Hey, this is Jesse's mom. Like, oh, Jesse's mom. Well, how bizarre. We really enjoyed Jesse joining us on that pilgrimage. He really left an impression. Jesse impressed those young men, and I think those young men impressed Jesse. So, yeah, this is great. What's going on? How's Jesse? Oh, Jesse's dead. Jesse was murdered. His old life caught up to him. His years in prison for drugs, his use of opioids, the men he was dealing with, they caught up to him and they killed him because he went straight and they were still into the drug scene. And Jesse had told me on the way that he had a buddy who really wanted also to do a pilgrimage. And Jesse thought, now that I've done these few days guided on a pilgrimage, can we do this pilgrimage on our own? And I said, yeah, here's your pilgrim credential that he's been filling out, but here are 2 empty ones. You can come back at any time with your friend and do this pilgrimage. It'll be fun. And when they found Jesse's body, he had those pilgrim credentials in his pocket. It meant so much to him. And Jesse's mom told me that he had those pilgrim credentials in his pocket. And Jesse's mom told me that what impressed Jesse was that I trusted him. The hate and fear carved into his knuckles as tattoos, all the tattoos on his shaved head, his rough look. He was so accustomed since he was a little boy being kicked around and just disliked immediately. But I trusted him and welcomed him to be a pilgrim. And I didn't think of it at the time that I was doing anything extraordinary. Yeah, he was rough looking, but he wanted to do a pilgrimage. A pilgrimage begins in the heart, and he wanted to do a pilgrimage. It doesn't matter what he looks like. He wanted to do the pilgrimage, and he did the pilgrimage. And he benefited from the pilgrimage, and he contributed to the pilgrimage, contributing to these other young men, and contributing to our host communities. A pilgrimage is all about trust and not judging others, especially based on their appearance. You don't judge others because of their nationality or their language. You don't judge them based on their vocabulary. He was so rough at first, but I said, straighten up, and he did. Just trust somebody. Trust is the foundation of peace, and peace is universal. So, in the folk tale of nail soup, you have to ask yourself, who is the stranger? Is the stranger somebody to be distrusted, tall tale with a rusty nail who got himself some soup? Or is the stranger somebody to be acknowledged and valued? And maybe that stranger is Christ himself, who shows us we're here to show each other we're stronger together than we are as individuals. So the pilgrimage from Purgatory is a great one. From Purgatory, Colorado to Chimayo, New Mexico. But a pilgrimage, you guys know, you're pilgrims. Pilgrimage is not exclusive. It's a personal experience, but it is not private. You've got to be welcoming, or you're really not a pilgrim. You know, it's not a selfish endeavor. It's an inclusive endeavor. So that's the tale of Jesse. Now, I was on a pilgrimage alone some years before that, walking from Denver to the Basilica of Guadalupe in New Mexico. And I had to find a path. There are no giant yellow arrows telling you where to go, but there's history. And I found in the archives an old map, a copy of an old map anyway, from the 1600s. And it showed that from Mexico City, going all the way up to Taos, were a pathway for the Spaniards to follow. And the Franciscan missionaries who supported all the missionaries all the way up to Taos, they would go every 3 years back and forth between Taos and Mexico City. And so the Spanish government, this is in the 1600s, they would subsidize communities every 40 kilometers, right? Every 25 or 30 miles to have a well to supply water and help the Franciscan missionaries on their way between Taos and Mexico City. Only every 3 years, but stay there all the time and be there to help those missionaries. And so I kept asking, are they there? Are they still there? Because eventually when they put the rail line through and the Spanish Santa Fe Trail met up after 1845, they had the Camino del Norte from Mexico City to Santa Fe, and the Santa Fe Trail from Kansas City to Santa Fe. So these were trading networks. But that pathway was a little bit different than this original watering stations that were set up by the Spanish government, because the oxen trains went at a different pace than the Franciscans who were walking. So it was off a little bit, it's a different direction. And eventually that was paved, and that is now Highway 45 in the state of Chihuahua in Mexico, the Pan American Highway. I did not want to walk along a highway as a pilgrim, no. I did not even want to be seen walking nearby a highway. It's very dangerous. The noise, it's unpleasant, just the dangers of being watched. That's not my gig. So I kept asking, are these watering stations in this old map still there? And nobody could tell me. So once I came down from Denver, I went through Chimayo, I continued south through Las Cruces and then El Paso, and I crossed into Mexico at Ciudad Juarez. Anyone could tell me, are these still there? No one could tell me. So with an act of faith, I walked into the desert to go to what was indicated on these 400-year-old maps. Hey, they're still there. 2 or 3 little huts with a deep well. Families are there, just small communities. But I didn't know, but I went and they were there. And I thought, this is going to be great. First day, it worked. Second day, it worked. Third day, I am light as can be. I'm happy. This is, just going through the Chihuahua Desert, heading south. How do you get to Mexico City from Denver? You just walk south. You can't go wrong. It's a desert with lots of topography, mountains, cactus, rocks, other little plants, mesquite, lots of snakes, lots of scorpions, hot sand, but even in winter. And I'm walking down, I'm just walking south. There's no path, there's no road. I'm just hoping, based on the topography and this old map that I had, that I could find this cluster of huts. So, I'm happy. No stress, no worries, no problems. After a while, one morning, I saw off to the distance a modified pickup truck, like a king cab, with big tires to go through the sand and over the rocks. And in the back of the pickup truck, 4 mounted automatic weapons, and 4 men with bandoliers and sidearms, each holding one of these weapons. They were all pointed toward me. And this pickup truck comes in front of me to the south, so I'm facing the sun, it's hard to see. And 4 men get out, and they surround me. So I have the 4 men in the truck with their big weapons on me, and 4 other men on the ground, each with a weapon. And they also had the bandoliers and the sidearms. I mean, these were rough guys, narcotraficantes. These guys are protecting their corner of the desert where drugs are trafficked between Mexico and the U.S. Well, had nothing to do with me. I'm just a pilgrim. And these guys are all shouting, and they're just all upset, and they're all yelling at the same time. It was chaos, confusion. And I just stayed calm, because really, 8 men, heavily armed, with a weapon pointed right at me, each of them, and I'm one pilgrim. And they're asking questions: who are you, where are you going, what's in your backpack, who else is with you, all these questions at the same time. And I'm just looking around, finding the oldest man there. Are you the boss? Yes. And it's in Spanish. And he's got the weapon right at me. And I'm like, stop that, stop that. Put that down. And he shouts, who are you? What are you doing? And I said, guys, calm down. I'm just a pilgrim. I'm going from Denver to the Basilica of Guadalupe in Mexico City. And they're holding their weapons. And when I said the Basilica of Guadalupe, they put them aside enough to cross themselves. So it's going to be okay. But find the oldest man again, and I pushed it aside, and I don't mean to say you're the oldest man here. Pushing away his weapon, he's got it on me, and he's like, don't touch my weapon. He said, why aren't you afraid? I was calm. I was like, look, fella, I'm a pilgrim. Either my pilgrimage ends at Basilica of Guadalupe in Mexico City, or my pilgrimage ends in heaven. Either way, I'm okay. You decide. He holds his weapon at me. He pauses, he moves, and he says, hey, pilgrim, would you pray for me? And I said, hey, yeah, I have this little booklet for intenciones, for your prayer intentions. I'll carry them all the way to the Basilica of Guadalupe. Write whatever you want in here, I'll take it. And the man still says, holding his gun, oh yeah. He says, well then, hey, don't pray for me, pray for my little boy Jose, because I don't want him to grow up into this life. And you know, until that moment in the Chihuahua desert, I honestly didn't think I had any enemies. I mean, sure, there are people I don't like, but enemies? I didn't think I had an enemy. But the narcotraficantes of the Chihuahua desert are not my friends. These men for sure have killed, for sure. Yet, it does say, it's not enough to love the people who love you back. You must love your enemies as well. I gotta love them. And this man said, pray for me. And when I said, write your name in the book, I'll pray for everyone who's in this book. I won't forget, I promise. He said, don't pray for me. Pray for my little boy Jose, because I don't want him to grow up into this life. That's love. He loves his little boy. I gotta love his little boy. And I gotta love him for loving his little boy. There's no more hate here. Put your weapons down, brother. And another one of the younger men who was off to my side, he's like, oh, pray for my grandmother because I know she always prays for me. Yes, she does. Put her name in this book. You can't judge. It's not for us to judge. It's not for us to be haughty. We must love those who love us back. We must love our enemies as well, because we don't understand the life of our world needs more pilgrims, eh? So, after I had that experience in Mexico, the following year I was on a pilgrimage from Santiago, and I was walking to Jerusalem, because it was the Arab Spring. And in the Arab Spring, I thought, no one's going to look at their visas. So maybe I could walk from Europe to Jerusalem across North Africa when everybody's tied up. Maybe I could go Spain to Morocco, to Algeria, to Tunisia, to Libya, to Egypt, across Sinai, to Israel, and get to Jerusalem. Maybe I could do that. I gotta take a chance. So I arrived in Santiago, I walked south, I crossed into Morocco. Crossing, I had a lot of difficulties with Algeria. I ended up taking some ships around. I got to Tunisia, had some interest. Got to Libya, a little difficulty. Kind of escaped, got to Egypt. My first day in Egypt, after an escape from Libya. There are lots of sand dunes reminiscent of the desert in Chihuahua Desert in Mexico. But this is the Sahara. Big sand dunes, very deep. Like, here we are, 1 story, 2 story, like 3 stories tall, these sand dunes. And some of them you could look down deep, and at the bottom there was a little oasis, 2 or 3 palm trees, and maybe a hut or 2. And others, there's just nothing. But with my stiff boots and my hiking poles and my eagerness to get out in the air again, it's like aggressing those sand dunes, up. Got to the top, woo, look at me. And then with my stiff-soled boots and coming from Colorado, skiing right down, sand skiing, down to the bottom. And then up, skiing down the next one. It was exhausting, but it was beautiful. I was just happy to be there. And after some time, I see off several sand dunes over. Hey, look at that, they're camels. Hey, look at that, there are men on the camels. Hey, look at that, they're heavily armed. Oh, saddlebags, richly embroidered. So, one thing, in the desert, as in the snow, you cannot hide your footprints. There's nowhere to run to, nowhere to hide, so don't piss them off. So at one point, I'm on top of a sand dune, and they're on top, and I just wait, hi guys, and I'm just waiting. And after a little while, the 2 camels come up on either side of me, my strong side and my weak side. And the men are up on top. I can tell you, camels are big, much, much bigger than horses. They were so high up there. And I can't look in 2 directions at once, so I had to let the left side guy go and look at the right side guy, the younger man. And this camel came up beside me so fast, and that man so beautifully, acrobatically leapt off the camel saddle, and he landed in front of me with that automatic weapon right at my face. What do you do? Same as in Mexico the year before. Stay calm, smile. Because look, acts of aggression. If I respond to aggression with aggression, I'm going to lose. If I respond to aggression with defiance, you can't do that, I'm an American. You can't do that, I'm a pilgrim. I'm going to lose. If you respond to aggression with fear, I'm going to lose. The only logical way to respond to aggression is to stay calm, is to smile, and make a request. So, the man landed in front of me with the weapon leveled right at my face. I pull out my water bottle, I smile, and I say in the Arabic greeting, Assalamu alaikum, may the peace of the Lord be with you. Do you have any water? And in an instant, this fairly young man threw his weapon over his shoulder, opened the saddlebag of his camel, and pulled out a bundle of twigs, put it in the sand, lit a fire, had a small teapot and a bottle of water. He prepared tea for the 3 of us right there on the top of the sand dune in the desert. I have made a request. One must honor the request of a stranger. And within some small moments, we're all drinking tea. And it gets explained to me that earlier in the morning, this was a fairly young man and his uncle. And the younger man had 2 small children. The children were born and raised in this little oasis. And they saw me in a distance and had no vocabulary words to describe what they saw. They wouldn't see a woman with a backpack, a white woman with no veil, just a sun hat, a visor. They had no vocabulary words. We saw something in the desert. And excitedly, they ran home to their father. Daddy, Daddy, we saw something in the desert, without words. So of course, the children's father and his uncle from the little oasis loaded up the camels with their weapons to go and protect their world. And in this circumstance, I realized, hey, I am the enemy. I am the stranger. It's up to me to say, no, don't get excited. I'm just a pilgrim. I'm a pilgrim walking from Spain to the Holy Land. I'm just passing through. I'm as happy as can be. I am no threat to you. And in an instant, because I asked them for hospitality, please, do you have any water? And they gave me tea because you have to boil the water there. They were so delighted. Please come and stay with us for a month. We have so much to learn from you, and you have so much to learn from us. They wanted to know why I was there, and what brought them there, and how my Arabic can be so bad. But it was only my first day of Egypt. I had come from Morocco, where I started picking up Arabic, and all across North Africa, the dialects changed dramatically. But it was all in an instant relaxed. I realized I am the stranger, and therefore it is up to me to turn this around into something joyful and lovely, not into something, not escalate into something ugly and bad. So, hey, I'm the enemy. You gotta love me. I'm lovable. This is not normal pilgrimage. This is not pilgrimage to Santiago. But you understand, as a pilgrim, wanting in my heart a pilgrimage to go to the Holy Land, to go to Jerusalem, so historic, so important, so spiritual, so moving, I really need to rely on people every day to offer me water, to offer me shelter at night, a safe, secure place to sleep at night. Therefore, I must ask. So it's up to me, the intruder here, to de-escalate any situation, to calm things down, to just smile and say, hi, I'm a pilgrim. So, okay, next story is what you've been waiting for, the Bulgarian. Oh. Okay, so I had been on pilgrimage number 3, going for pilgrimage for St. Andrew. And I started in Kiev, Ukraine, going to Patra, Greece, going to where the tomb, the shrine of St. Andrew was from the 1st century. And he was crucified on the X, the St. Andrew's X. And that X, the wood, is still there in Patra, Greece. So it's really cool.
Is that the Gulf of Patra?
Well, it's the city of Patra.
Thank you. Okay. Is that where the battle of the Patra was?
I don't know. Not into that.
That's it.
But I was going from Kiev down to Patras, Greece. And of course I had to, along the Black Sea, by and large, I had to pass through Bulgaria. And it was in winter. I'm the Winter Pilgrim. So lots of snow. And I entered Bulgaria from Romania. And after a day, one day in Bulgaria, the second day, the first day I encountered a Bulgarian Orthodox priest and his wife, and they took very good care of me. And I said, okay, I have a map of Bulgaria, nothing more. And is there a monastery I can get to for the next day? And there's an indication on the map, a little marker, a little circle with a cross on top. Is that a monastery? The priest said, yeah, I think it is. I remember going there as a small boy long, long ago. And if I recall, it's across a big, broad field, and then there's a big wooden cross, and then a forest, and down inside that forest, down steeply, there's a sacred well, and the monastery is right next to the well. And that's it. I think that's what that cross is indicating. So it was snowing at night. We had our meal, went to sleep. It was snowing heavily all night. It was still snowing heavily in the morning and blowing wildly. It was a blizzard. And they were like, you should stay here another day, pilgrim. Like, pilgrims get up and go. That's what we do. It'll be fine. And I set out in the snow and had my walking sticks. I had a soft shell jacket, and the wind was coming right at me and getting icy all in my front. And soft shell is all about breathing. And so you can't breathe through your fabric when it's covered with ice. So it was hard going physically. It was hard. But I'm out there walking, and the snow is high, and it's drifting, And I'm up and I'm down. It was like going on frozen waves on the ocean. And I'm looking at my little map and I'm thinking, this is pretty bad. The monastery should be this way. But if I miss that monastery, there's nothing else. And this way there is another village, but it's the wrong direction. So I wanted to go that way, toward the monastery. Let me take a chance, come on. It was maybe 1 or 2 in the afternoon, I could do this. But I kept walking and walking, and hours pass, and the wind blows, and there's lots of whiteouts, and it's hard going, and I'm up and down and post-holing. I had no snowshoes on that trip. I mean, I didn't know I needed them. And I kept going, and eventually I saw a sign very close to the snow level. That was the top of a street sign, that handwritten, painted monastery that way. It was pointed right down into the snow. And you know, you're looking at a map of the whole country. Maybe that's 1/4 of a kilometer or 2 kilometers. It was so vague. But okay, it should be that way-ish. And I was counting my steps to make sure that I kind of had the idea of where I was going. Maybe in the front of me, in the distance, there was a forest, but there were whiteouts and blowing snow, and then clear, and then blowing snow. It was hard going. And I was kind of pissed at myself for not going to that village that I had the chance to hours earlier, and I'm thinking, what a fool I am. And I come along, and I'm thinking, this is bad. And I'm looking around, this is bad. And I'm thinking, all right, it's getting late. I should just start to make a snow shelter, a cave in the snow, and spend the night, and I'll be fine, but I'll be cranky, just I'll be happy. But I'll survive, but this is bad. This is a bad move by me. And I'm looking around, hoping something's going to be clarified, and I slipped. And I realized I was standing on the roof of a car. That's how deep the snow was. The roof of a car. And I thought, oh, maybe I can sleep in the car. And I'm stamping on it. And if there's a car here, I might be near the monastery. I was full of hope. So I did survival skill mechanisms. Okay, I have my compass. Go north 100 paces. See what I see. Come back. Go northeast 100 paces. See what I see, come back, to try to assess where I was. And it was becoming clear that there was a forest to the east of me. And I come back. And then I'm southeast, and I see a tall tree, so tall it's just up into the white. And I think, there are no branches on this tree. Maybe this is not a tree. Maybe this is the giant wooden cross the priest had remembered from his childhood. That's a leap. But maybe, I thought, then it's this direction. And I kept going. And I got into the forest, and the wind abated, and snow was softer. It wasn't having the crusty surface anymore. So I was basically swimming through the snow, which was definitely well over my head. And I swim down into this glade, and I saw in the dim dusk, night was coming on, the little monastery. Woo! So I get down there and see a little hut with a light and smoke coming out of the chimney. Woo-hoo! So I get down and I go up the little steps, clean myself up. And I see inside the frosted window, there was a monk in a kitchen. And I tapped on the window, and you never saw someone jump vertically so much in this howling storm. And I just got there, and he looked out, and I'm like, hi. And he opened the door. And he's about my age, and at the time, mid-40s or so. And he opened the door, and he says in Bulgarian, who are you? What are you doing here? Come inside, get by the fire. And all this fuss. And I get by the fire, and all the ice is dropping off of me and like flashing like broken glass. And I'm just so happy. And he's just concerned. Where did I come from? How did I get there? Who am I? What am I doing? But okay, first things first, what do you do with a pilgrim? You feed a pilgrim. So he had been preparing his own meal, and he sliced his piece of meat absolutely in half, and his potato in half, and his beet in half, and his piece of bread in half. And we sat down together in front of the fire, and we shared a meal. And at first, it was only my second day in Bulgaria, and I'm just spitting out a handful of words. Hello, I am a pilgrim. And that's as far as we got. And I tried in Russian, which is pretty bad for me, and we weren't getting very far there. We were trying. But then we went to, I think, French, and we muddled through. His French wasn't very good, and then we tried German, and his German wasn't very good, and then finally, after about 20, 25 minutes, he switched to English. This works. And he explained that he was still a novice, even though he was an older guy in his 40s, but it was his third career choice. He had grown up in communism, and he had a career but didn't suit him. And then he switched to computer programming once the wall came down, communism was over in Bulgaria, but it didn't satisfy him. So now he was trying to become a monk in Bulgarian Orthodox, which would have been really hard life under communism, but he thought maybe this is what he's called for. But the prior and the other monk of this little monastery were in the town I had come from that day. And so I knew they weren't coming back that night. He should not have been there alone. It was supposed to be a day trip, but all the snow, they were gone. So he was unexpectedly there alone. And he's not supposed to receive anybody. And he is certainly not supposed to receive a woman. And there he was, though, and he shared his meal with me and the warmth of the fire. And we were just talking so convivially. It was really comfortable and really nice. And then I was tired, and I said, you know, what I really need to do now is sleep. So I'd really like to sleep here by the fire. And he said, I'll bring you more firewood. But Orthodox monks are not allowed to sleep under the same roof as a woman anywhere. And there were some rooms, but they were under the same roof. So he just gathered a few things and he just disappeared into the night, into the storm. And what did I say? Goodbye. And he said he'd be back in the morning. I'm just going to sleep. So I slept well. You sleep well when you're exhausted and well fed. And in the morning, tap on the door, he comes in with a big arm of firewood, and he starts to prepare tea and some bread for breakfast and some porridge. And he had a different demeanor, where the night before he was convivial and happy and we were communicating. Now he was more tense and befuddled and not communicating words well. And he sat next to me, or across from me on this table, and he explained to me that he spent the night in the chapel reading everything he could find about pilgrims and pilgrimage. Because you can imagine that in the Orthodox world, in the communist world, there is no such thing as a pilgrim since the time before my grandfather's grandfather, is how they refer to the time before communism, the pre-Bolshevik times, the times of my grandfather's grandfather. And in those times, there were pilgrims, but they were monks. They were men. They traveled in pairs. They were the smartest, cleverest of the monks who could have the savvy to travel around. And they would go monastery to monastery to kind of check up on those monasteries to see how they're doing, what they're up to. They're not to be trusted. They're to be kind of afraid of. In no circumstance could there be something that was a pilgrim who was a woman alone in winter and the dangers, coming out of a blizzard, a Roman Catholic, an American. It just did not fit the definition of a pilgrim. So he was very confused. And he spent the night reading everything he could find in the monastery library about what is a pilgrim. And then he shared with me, he said to me, I know you. You're Jesus Christ. Maybe I've overstated. Just a pilgrim. But he told me a tale he had read during the night. An old Orthodox kind of folk tale, like the nail soup folk tale. And the folk tale he described in this way. That long ago and far away, there was a community, and Jesus came and he preached at the town square every day. And there was a pious and charitable woman who was going there every day listening to everything Jesus had to say. And one day she had the courage to step up and say to Jesus, Jesus, it would be my greatest honor if you would come to my home and I could entertain you in my home. And Jesus said, yeah, sure, I'll be there tomorrow. She was amazed. Yeah, you'll be in my home tomorrow. This is great. What does she do? She runs home, she fixes everything, cleans everything, gets everything neat and tidy, new lace, everything fine. She makes all this food. In the morning, she gets up, she prepares all sorts of things, not knowing when Jesus is going to arrive. At the end of the morning, there's a knock on the door. She runs to the door thinking it's Jesus. But it's a neighbor who says, hey, we're gathering some money for the prisoners. We feel sorry for them and want to get some blankets. Do you have any blankets or any money to contribute to help this cause? She said, what? Today's not a good day. Of course I can, but not now, not now. Go away, come back tomorrow. Off goes the neighbor. So she's fussing and she's fussing and she's pacing and she's worrying. Toward mid-afternoon, there's another knock on the door. Runs to the door, opens the door. It's a young student, hat in hand, who says, I'm studying theology at the university, and you're known as being a pious and charitable woman, and I need some money for books. Can you help me out in any way? And she said, yes, but not now. I'm expecting someone very busy. You've got to go away, come back tomorrow. And so he goes. And she's fussing and fussing, and she's in the house all alone, and she's pacing all the rest of the day. And coming toward nightfall, she hears another knock at the door. She says, this is Jesus. She runs, opens the door, and it's a pilgrim. And the pilgrim says, Madam, you're known as being a pious and charitable woman, and I'm a pilgrim going to a shrine, and I just need a place to sleep tonight. Can I have some shelter in this house? And she said, no, not now. I'm expecting somebody very busy. You've got to go away, come back tomorrow. Pilgrim goes away. Nothing else happens that night. Nobody else comes. The widow was heartbroken, the old lady. And in the morning she gets up and she goes down to the square. She's very dejected. She finds Jesus at the square. She says, Jesus, you told me you would come to my house yesterday, but you never came and I'm heartbroken. How can you tell me that and then not do it? And Jesus says, what are you talking about? I came 3 times. I was that neighbor. I was that student. And I was that pilgrim. And when you turn away a pilgrim, you've turned away from me. The woman felt bad. So, okay, that was the story this Bulgarian monk had told me. And when he said again, I know you, you're Jesus Christ. I said, yay, you didn't slam the door on me. You welcomed me in and you shared your meal with me. That was the thing you should do. And that Bulgarian monk was so shaken, but it was beautiful. And then I had my morning breakfast, I had my meal. The sun was shining right after the blizzard. Everything looks like winter wonderland. It was beautiful. And I said, okay, thank you so much, monk. I can leave now. There was no pilgrim register to sign, but this monk gave me a small medallion. And he said, thank you for visiting. This has been very helpful for me. And I said, thank you for offering me shelter. This has been very helpful for me. And I left, lighthearted. But you know, after about 2 hours, I'm out walking, and you know, 2 hours, pilgrims, that's a long way to go. Pilgrims don't like to go back. But after about 2 hours, it suddenly occurred to me, I left nothing tangible, nothing material for that monk. And I could only imagine then, some days later, when his prior and the other monk would make it back to that monastery through the snow, that poor guy would say, hey guys, remember the night of the storm? Funny thing, a pilgrim came, but not what you would think, because the pilgrim was a woman, an American, Roman Catholic, all alone, traveling in winter, and came through the storm. Every element sounds preposterous, and he had nothing tangible to say, really, it happened. And I can imagine that poor man was doubting himself. Did that really happen, or had he dreamt it? Maybe he saw my footprints in the snow. I don't know. But after a few hours gone, well, I'm not going back. But I felt for him, and I was very, very grateful that he had helped me. But I realized, you know what? That man saved me from a terrible storm. Yet, that was not my experience. That monk had been praying for some sign. Does he sign his final vows or does he not? He had to decide the future. And he needed to know, was he a monk or wasn't he? And he was all alone unexpectedly. And what happens? Pilgrim shows up in a terrible storm. He was all alone. What does he do? I don't know what happened to that monk. Did he sign his final vows, or did he think, this is crazy life? I don't know. So it wasn't my experience. It was my experience, but it wasn't my experience. It was not there for me. This monk had been praying for a sign, and I arrived. And I don't know what he did with that. So it's to say, we all have shared experiences. They're uncontrolled, uncontrollable. We've just got to show up and do our part without trying to control things and without trying to direct anything, without having the answers. We just got to show up. I love that Bulgarian monk. I don't know whatever happened to him. I want to think he took his vows, final vows. I don't know. But he saved me. And I continued on my way. So, following year, I was going from, or 2 years later, sorry, I was going from Santiago to Jerusalem across North Africa. So, I passed the Camels. I passed through Egypt, I passed through Sinai, went all through Israel, and I arrived at Jerusalem. But it was the end of the day, and it was really raining and cold, and I was tired, but ecstatic. It was 6,000 something kilometers. I was so happy. But I didn't want to enter the walls of the old Jerusalem city at the end of the day. I wanted to kind of collect myself, tidy up, and go in fresh in the morning. So everybody knows that the pilgrim destination in Jerusalem since the Second Crusade has been the Couvent Notre Dame. And it's right outside the main gate to Jerusalem. I had no idea. Some pilgrims had told me about this, and way back in France, I had no idea what it was all about. But I went there. And it's a big convent hotel. It's very fancy. Brass and ferns and potted plants everywhere, and lots of people bustling. Very fancy. And I come in after 6 months, rather tattered and weathered and soaking wet because of the climate and weather that day. But I was so happy. And I go up to the reception desk and I said, well, are there any, is there a Mother Superior? It's a convent. Are there nuns, sisters? I'm a pilgrim. And so it's like, everybody here are pilgrims. Everybody is a pilgrim. They all come by bus and pay a bucket of money to be there with their priest. And I'm like, I'm not that kind of pilgrim. I walked from Spain. They're like, yeah, we don't care. And I said, okay, if there's no sister, is there a priest maybe? Yeah, we've got a priest. Call your priest down. I need to talk with the priest. So they're like, go stand over there, behind all of the plants. Just, he'll come down. And after a while, he did. This 6'7" red-headed Irish priest. And he comes down and he looks, you're the pilgrim? Did you really walk from Spain? And I had my pilgrim credential, and I was like, yep, I got it. Every night where I slept, there were in these pilgrim credentials in this book. He said, well, this is remarkable. This is wonderful. What a journey. You must be so proud. And I said, yes, and I just need a place to stay tonight. And tomorrow I'll enter the old city. He said, yeah, of course. And I said, I'm a mendicant pilgrim. I've come from Spain. I'm mendicant. I have no money. And he said, we're having some construction renovation. We're booked. There's no place for you tonight. There's no place for you. And I said, come on. I can sleep on the roof. I don't care. I can sleep in the back pew of your chapel. I don't care. I've come a long, long way, and I'm very tired. And he said, you deserve more, Pilgrim. He said he wrote down 6 different other religious houses. He said, you could go to any one of these. They're better for you than here. I was exhausted, and I said, oh, please, Father, please call them and find one that will accept me, and then I can just walk directly there. It'll be fine. But don't just send me out into the cold rain. He said, you know, Pilgrim, it's best that you show up on your own. I was mad. I was tired, I was exhausted, I was frustrated, I was mad. Thank you, Father. It's the only thing you're allowed to say. Thank you. So I go out and I find the first one. It's many, many blocks away. And I go there, and it's a community of religious sisters. I'm a Mendicant Pilgrim. I have no money, but I need a place to stay tonight. I come from Spain on foot. Yeah, we're booked. And I go to the next place, far, far away. Yeah, we're booked. Not a place for you to sleep. I go to the next, and I go to the next, and everybody says, we're full, we can't take you. I was so frustrated, so angry. The last place, and it was outside, it was in the Palestinian-controlled area of Jerusalem, or outside Jerusalem, West Bank. And I go, and I looked up the walls of this place, and it's Palestinian-controlled, and it's now dark. There are men hanging out on the street corners, and I'm like, pilgrims don't like the dark. Pilgrims want to be inside. So I looked up, and it was the Santiago de Santa Marta. If you know any biblical stories, you might know of the one, Martha, Mary, and Lazarus. And Jesus stayed with them. They were friends. And when Jesus arrived there on what became Palm Sunday, he entered, and Martha fussed, and Mary just listened to Jesus, and Martha fussed. Oh, Jesus, Mary's not helping. And then Mary anointed the feet of Jesus with the oil of nard. And then the next day, Jesus rode the donkey on Palm Sunday into Jerusalem. This is the place. And I buzzed. And they said, you know, yes. And I said, because it was written in Spanish, I said in Spanish, I am a pilgrim. I've come from Spain. There are men hanging out on the corners. I've been turned away from 6 different places. I need a place to sleep tonight. Please let me in, please. And they said, okay. And the gate opened. And I ran in, and it was a huge, huge, huge retreat center with 3 Passionist priests, but no other guests, because it was the West Bank, and it was 2012. And there was a lot of conflict going on, and tour buses were not going to the West Bank. So the rest of the city was very crowded, but this part of the city was not. And I got up to the door, and they saw me soaking wet and very tattered and very weathered, invites me in. And I explained, here's my pilgrim credential. He had a seat for me. And they looked at it, and in an instant, there was an Italian, a Spaniard, and a Filipino. The Filipino ran off to get some towels. The Italian ran off to get some coffee, and the Spaniard ran off to get a basin of water and the oil of nard, and washed my feet, and anointed my feet with the oil of nard, and said, Pilgrim, you can stay here as long as you'd like. Oh, I love this place. This is so good, and every frustration dissolved away. And the next morning I went into the city, and I enjoyed the culmination of my long pilgrimage. But I felt terrible, because that whole evening, the night before, I was so angry at that giant Irish priest who turned me away. I was so angry with him, and that was wrong with me. And in the end, it was good that I got turned away from him and went to this great place. So I thought, okay, I got to go back and find that giant Irish priest and apologize. So I go back, go to the desk. I'm still looking pretty tattered, but now without my backpack. I was a little springier. And they said, yeah, he's at Mass right now. It just started a little while ago. You can go in the back and join in. So I came in the back. It was really crowded, a couple hundred people there perhaps. And I'm sure he did not see me. And I came in as the readings were starting and said the gospel. Shamefully, I don't remember the gospel reading, but he said his homily. He had his notes, put them aside, and he starts saying that there was an old tale from Russian Orthodox tradition where there was a pious and charitable woman who asked Jesus to come to her house. And he told that same story that the Bulgarian monk had told me 2 years before. And he finishes the story and he says, when you turn away from a pilgrim, you turn away from me. It's the story that Jesus says to the pious woman. And that priest said, don't turn away a pilgrim. So I finished the Mass, and after the Mass, I waited and waited, everyone's kind of gone, and I stepped out. He sees me, 6'7", he sees me, he says, Pilgrim! And he hugged me. And he said, I turned you away. And I said, thank you for turning me away. Because I found the Santiago de Santa Marta, and they were so gracious, and that's where I needed to be. So please forgive me, because I was angry with you. He's like, it works. As a pilgrim, you cannot demand. You cannot expect what you want. You just have to let it happen. And what happens is going to be the right thing. So it was a difficult time, and the Irish priest and I stayed in contact for many, many years. I mean, he was really, in the end, very gracious to me. It was a mutual kind of compatibility. But when you're a pilgrim, you just have to accept whatever the story is, whatever the situation is. So everyone's getting tired. Those are some of my stories. I have many other stories, but